Good evening and welcome to CrowdHealing, a public information service in cooperation with the We Heal Foundation and KIYS Radio. Tonight's segment, Sugar, Carbs, and the Obesity Epidemic, is brought to you by Proof Smart Foods, curing obesity one meal at a time. America is suffering from a self-inflicted epidemic called obesity. The CDC, or Center for Disease Control, reports that about 40%, or 93.3 million adults, are obese, with rates among Hispanic and Black populations near 50%. The annual medical cost of obesity in the United States was estimated at $147 billion in 2008 and has continued to rise. The average American diet is estimated to be 90% carbs, with much of the rest being fat and protein. This is mainly because of the dependence on processed foods. The food industry doesn't want you to know that because of processed foods, each person in the U.S. on average consumes 170 pounds of raw sugar per year, which equates to a half pound of sugar daily per person. That doesn't include the other carbs consumed: juice, bread, grains, potatoes, rice, noodles, etc., all which your body processes the same as sugar. Obesity-related conditions include heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and certain types of cancer, which are some of the leading causes of preventable premature death. In other words, sugar in large quantities is poison. Tonight we'll discuss the food industry, what the food industry doesn't want you to know, and how you can avoid disease and maximize your health and quality of life by being aware and making simple adjustments to your diet and lifestyle. With me today is Lauren Hoover West, a chef and holistic nutrition coach with a degree in psychology. She's the author of the blog and cookbook, No Wheat, No Dairy, No Problem. We also have William Hogarty, is the CEO of Proof Smart Food, Inc., our sponsor for today's segment, and a lifelong fitness guru, winning 12 of 15 bodybuilding competitions that he participated in. Dr. Scott James is a professor of geosciences at mechanical engineering at Baylor University and a lifelong health and fitness enthusiast. Seth Cox is a food scientist with 35 years' experience in the industry. He has utilized a wide range of analytical and baking science skills to make positive contributions to the world of food, including the famous lean Hot Pockets. So, Dr. Scott James, tell us physiologically what happens when we eat sugar.
Well, it's just something that we have not really evolved to handle, are those sugar loads that you mentioned in your opening. Researchers have gone back and looked at diets when our country was founded in the 1770s, and the average sugar consumption by an American was about 4 pounds per year. And as you noted, we're up to about 170 pounds per year. And evolution doesn't allow us to adapt to such rapid changes in sugar consumption. And you also mentioned that how sugar is linked to obesity. That makes perfect sense. But it's also linked to increased cancer risks, increased anxiety, increases in depression, problems with sleeping or insomnia, and perhaps most importantly, metabolic diseases like diabetes. So what happens when you eat sugar is your body chemically recognizes that sugar and your pancreas secretes insulin. And that insulin transports the sugar from your bloodstream and deposits it in either fat or in muscles, as well as in your liver. But if your muscles and liver are already full, then it must deposit as fat. One of the things that I found most interesting recently is that a new type of diabetes was identified called type 3 diabetes. And they found this out by running experiments where they gave people either sugar or sugar substitutes and then measured the levels of insulin in their body. And it turned out that even when you ate a sugar substitute, your insulin level would go up. Now, only 25% as much as if it was real sugar, which means that something besides your pancreas was recognizing that sugar. It turns out that your brain also can secrete insulin. And so when you taste something sweet, your brain will increase a bit of insulin.
I see. Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah.
Man, if you get insulin resistance in your brain as a type 3 diabetes, that's something that's really significant. And that can increase rates of dementia, depression, insomnia. So that's another aspect.
In other words, we're talking about almost like a psychological addiction to sugar. And this can cause a physiological reaction in the body, which can also cause a type of diabetes.
Sure, there's a chemical reaction where your pancreas will secrete insulin, and there's also a sensory reaction where your brain tastes the
Right,
sugar
right.
and should increase the.
Very interesting. I had no idea. Hey, so, Bill, what must happen in our culture, in our daily lives to change this epidemic?
It's fairly simple. We have to create foods that people love and are easy to prepare.
Uh-huh.
Now, that sounds simple, but the food industry right now is not prepared to do that. I've recently brought out these meals and get the sugar and salt out of them. 4 out of 5 food manufacturers would not do it. So it's really about creating great tasting foods that are so easy to get and easy to prepare. And so my thinking is having food that you can almost have fast food, but it solves the problem. Fast food doesn't have to be bad food. So it's creating foods that are available to consumers that don't take a lot of time to prepare, they don't take a lot of thinking, and it's easy to buy.
So that is amazing. I mean, and what an insight. I really had no idea. So Seth, how has the current awareness around the health risks with carbohydrates and sugar changed in regards to protein suppliers in the last 30 years in the food industry?
Hey, Drew, thank you so much. So when I first started in the industry in the early 80s, like 1982, I worked in a development center down in Texas, and all of our ingredients that we had at the time were to address the low fat craze. So we had modified starches of every different type and different fat replacers, and no protein ingredients whatsoever.
So it was like hydrogenated oils and things like that?
Mainly it was modified starches, maltodextrins and such.
Okay.
That were, and things that were fat mimicking to reduce fats. And of course, sugar was also used as a replacement for fat. So at the time, the only protein supplement that was around was hydrolyzed soy for meat extension. And just nothing in the industry that I was working in, which is the baking industry. And so the only offering at the time that we had was a bran muffin, only healthy offering that we had. And again, it was an extremely high sugar because it was a low fat item. So in the early 80s, we had almost no protein ingredients to work with at all. And of course, as the industry has changed over the years, I now have a library of at least 25 different good protein sources to work with. So it's changed dramatically.
I've heard, and you would be the one to answer this, that the food industry literally uses sugar and salt as a weight to increase the salability or increase the profit from the weight of food. So
absolutely. So many times we went into low sodium initiatives, and almost always that product would be rejected. A panel would always say that they wanted it, but we always added salt and fat and sugar to make to increase sales. And the joke is, if you want your product to pass a cutting, you go and you bump the salter as your test product's going by so that it dumps a little more salt on it and it gets chosen. So the industry is definitely following the consumer. So it's been quite a challenge, but sugar is by far one of the leading things, even in a savory item like a pizza. The more sugar you add, the higher your sales.
And that's because of the palate, the response of the consumer palate?
Absolutely, yes. As we formulated different pizza offerings, what we called a DiGiorno sauce was extremely sweet, and it was always chosen in the panels, even for a savory item like a pizza.
So back to what the doctor was referring to, Dr. James. We really are addicted to sugar in this culture, and not only does the food industry follow that, but we're dumping more food in there because that's what the palates are responding to. The more sweet it is, the more our brains like it, and the more we become addicted to it, and the worse it is for us. I mean, it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? So
absolutely, and it's not just the sugar; it's the highly refined starches that also
absolutely
raise the glycemic index. And we've really shot ourselves in the foot as we purposely move to make a lot of the inputs less healthy and more refined, getting closer and closer to sugar and their behavior in the body.
Absolutely. So, Lauren, can you tell us how do you know when and if you should be on a low carb diet, and how do you know which carbs are good for you?
That's a great question, Eric. So it's pretty complicated, and it's really good to definitely be working with someone that is knowledgeable about this. But I think the biggest problem here is refined carbs that are from packaged foods. So if we can get back to eating healthy plants that also, besides the carbs, have fiber in it. And when we're talking about diabetes and sugar levels and carbs, the fiber in a plant that has, sugar in it, like a sweet potato, is going to slow down the absorption of sugar. So you're not going to get that spike and crash. And it doesn't have the problems of a refined carb. So we actually all need to have some carbs for proper brain and bodily function. But it just needs to be from plants. And if someone is an athlete or someone's underweight, they're going to need more carbs from plants than someone that that maybe wants to lose weight. And that's when people tend to cut out the carbs, is when people are training or who want to lose weight.
Excellent. So if I want to know which, let's say, because I like a little bit of sweetener in my coffee, so if I'm going to choose the healthiest sweeteners, I was told that artificial sweeteners are bad. Obviously, your brain thinks of them as sugars and the same, and they're often chemical based. But there are some plant-based ones out there now, and then also just organic and low glycemic index, like an agave syrup and things like that. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about what what sugar substitutes there are? What are the healthy choices that we can make?
Sure, I can. And we are looking at glycemic levels here. And so we want to make sure that our blood sugar is balanced. And when people do eat more plants and eat a healthier diet, we actually crave less sugar. So as far as healthy sweeteners, I actually wrote a cookbook, and everybody loved agave. It was the big rage about 10 years ago, and some new research has come out to find that agave actually congests the liver, and there's over 200 bodily functions that happen from the liver. So really important not to use some of these trendy sweeteners, and going back to nature of like dates that have fiber in it, or date syrup, real maple syrup, not the syrup that has high fructose corn syrup, which blocks your metabolism. Also, just a less processed sugar, like a coconut sugar. Raw local honey that isn't over processed is really beneficial. And just, again, like moderation is probably the key.
Absolutely.
The
Yep.
best place for sweetener is really to satisfy and satiate the sweet that we want is in fruit. And remembering to look at the dirty dozen list to make sure that you're not eating a bunch of pesticides that are very harmful to health and contribute to these illnesses as well.
Well, thank you very much. So really, the bottom line message I get from that is go back to nature, go back to honeys, go back to, natural things that are less refined and natural sources.
Yeah. And
organic, natural sources. Absolutely.
definitely. And, just remembering that fiber is really important. So if you get, if you satiate that sweet tooth with organic fruit, like an organic green apple is got many, many health benefits. That old adage, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, is
yes.
really true. And it's actually gut healing. And so if you can go to fruit as your sugar source, then you're going to be better off.
Definitely better than a candy bar, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Your body's not going to have that sugar spike and crash and doing damage to the pancreas.
Excellent. So, Scott, can you tell us what are a few of the simplest tips you have that people can take from this to improve their diet? And I think, one thing I always think, after having conversations like this, I go to the grocery store and I look down, 5 of the 10 aisles and I see poison. I mean, it's potato chips, it's crackers, it's sugar, it's ice cream, it's literally half the aisles in the grocery store are sugar.
Sure. And I wanted to maybe just take one step back to make sure the audience knows what we mean by glycemic index. So the
Sure, absolutely.
Index is a way to rate how quickly your body responds to a sugar. And table sugar is given a value of 100. Anything higher than that is bad, lower is better. And, as mentioned, adding fiber to anything that you can makes sense. So a quick and dirty trick that I might use is to add a little bit of benefiber. It's a tasteless fiber that mixes in well with things, and it will help lower that glycemic index so you don't have such a quick insulin response and don't burn your pancreas out.
Oh wow! So you can, where's the application? Do you mix it in with your ice cream? I mean, what do you?
You can mix it in with oatmeals, for example.
Okay.
I put it in protein shakes. Any drinks that you have. There are some pretty easy suggestions I can give that are low-hanging fruits. One of them is just simply don't drink your sugars. It doesn't make any sense. So soda, there's just no room in anyone's diet for soda. But that also means that fruit juice really should be cut out. There's not a reason to drink those sugars. And that's usually a very easy thing for people to cut out because it's not hard to give up. Think about making better bad choices. So if you do drink a lot of sodas, switch to diet sodas and then see if you can get from diet sodas just to Crystal Light or something like that.
Sure.
Or
Yeah.
go to water or seltzer water.
I actually personally made a change, a shift for the first time in my life. Being over 50 years old now, for the first time I had bad cholesterol and high blood pressure, and it was because of a surgery I had that kept me from exercising. And over a period of time, I developed these problems for the first time in my life. And so, they mentioned, hey, you know what? It's probably not just that. It's probably, what are you intaking is sugars, and I had been drinking organic, natural lemonades and juices and things like that. I was always careful to be, these are natural things and natural, doesn't matter. It's sugar. It's sugar. Mm-hmm. So I switched to, those flavored sodas that have no sugar in them. And they actually taste good, and you get used to them real quick, and you actually almost feel like you're drinking something sweet because there's a little, fruit flavor in it, but literally, my blood tests improved 100% within 2 months just by changing that. Yeah. So
there's a piece of low-hanging fruit for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually have taught kids camps for the past 8 summers, and my goal was to get all those kids off of soda, and I did a little demonstration and asked them, do you know how much sugar's in your can of soda? And it's a 1/4 cup. And I asked them, would you pour this 1/4 cup of sugar down their throat? And their eyes would get as big as saucers, and they're like, no way. And I said, well, that's what you're doing when you drink a can of soda.
You're just adding water to it first, right?
So I introduced them to a soda called stevia, which is stevia sweetened, which is a natural sweetener. And if you do have type 3 diabetes, then you want to be careful of any sweeteners. But it is probably the most natural and best alternative sweetener right now. You want to definitely be careful of aspartame, which is actually made of ant poison and does contribute to diabetes and other problems. So,
that's a bad one.
So be careful of those artificial sweeteners and diet sodas.
Right, a majority of products on the shelves at the grocery store that are pre-sweetened are sweetened with aspartame. It's terrible. It's corn syrup for that. If it's diet, aspartame. Those are the 2 main ingredients in sweeteners. Terrible. Yeah. Seth, what things have to be undone that were broken to get us back on track, and what healthy foods are attractive to kids these days?
Well, having been challenged to deliver higher fiber foods to kids for a number of years, oatmeal is one most palatable. Popcorn is another one, which is a whole grain corn. And now we're discussing, and brown rice is probably the third. That's a little bit more of a challenge, but some new ones are like barley. Bill has products that have been formulated with barley. Barley is the lowest glycemic grain that's out there, has 32% fiber. So I'm doing some of the refining steps that we've done in the past. For years and years, coming from the milling industry, it was our challenge, our job was to remove all the good things from that flour and just leave the starchy endosperm. So we have to undo a lot of that. And some of the steps have been made, for instance, are ultra fine whole wheat, which has become more palatable, has a higher fiber content. And finding novel ways, for instance, to use the whole grains of barley and oats that have the high beta glucan, which do a fabulous job in reducing cholesterol in the body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's finding new milling and processing techniques. The whole industry grew up with just things getting more and more white and refined.
Right, right.
So all the industry was high speed to deal with that. And so it takes some different equipment to deal with high fibers and higher protein products. But that's the direction we have to go, is, first develop the ingredients, the inputs, and then the processing methods to make them delicious for the consumer.
Thank you, Seth. So we've already talked about some of the good alternatives to sugar. Bill, let's discuss just a few things before we wrap up here. What are some of the best foods to eat to maintain, as you as a competition weightlifter, to maintain muscle mass and high energy without the high carbs? And what are some of the messages that we want to leave our audience with today?
Let me share from the bigger picture. Belief systems shape outcomes. Organic sounds good, nobody's dying. Non-GMO sounds good, nobody's dying. These things people want to wrap themselves around. They think they're healthy, but organic honey is going to kill you just as fast as straight sugar. We want to lower carbohydrates. So getting foods that come out of the ground, oatmeal, my meals, they have vegetables in them that are like broccoli rice, cauliflower rice, high fiber, 7 grams of fiber, people don't even know it. So it's really about getting down the center of the street, reducing carbohydrates, getting away from refined sugar. And organic, half the certificates out there are not even real. They come from China. But people do it because they think it's okay. But there's no difference in the quality of the food. We want to reduce carbohydrates and want to stick to food how they came out of the ground and keep it simple. So my whole thing is eating high often, maybe every 2 or 3 hours, rather than one big meal a day, and avoid fast foods.
Avoid fast foods. Yep, absolutely.
One other comment I want to make
that
I found out, when I started doing the frozen meals, I thought that salt was put in frozen meals as a way to preserve. It's not. It's just a way to cheapen the food. It was very hard to get the salt out of there. It doesn't elongate it at all. It does make it taste better, but there are alternatives you can do that don't have sodium in it. So that was a real
eye-opener, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
So I guess what we'd like to do is maybe Lauren, if you have any comments, and same with you, Scott. What should consumers look for when buying packaged foods? Obviously, because people don't always have time to start and cook a meal from scratch these days. So when you're getting a frozen meal, when you're buying something that has been pre-prepared, what are some of the key things that we can look at to make the right choices?
The first thing you do is always read the labels.
Right.
Most people don't read the labels, and you will be startled when you pick up a bottle of ketchup and realize that it's 50% sugar, or you pick up peanut butter and it's mostly sugar, or my favorite yogurt. I have to get rid of flavored yogurt because it's all sugar. So simply read the labels, and it's really eye-opening. It's difficult to avoid sugar.
Yeah.
You never do it unless you read the labels.
But labels are overwhelming, so you want to look at the amount of protein, the amount of carbohydrates, and the amount of added sugar. There are so many yogurts out there that have a ton of added sugar, and they market it towards children, and it's really sad. But labels are overwhelming, so just look at the protein, look at the carbohydrates, and look at the added sugar, and that is a great start.
A great start. Thank you very much. Lauren, is there any last comments that you'd like to make before we...
Well, I teach people how to do this. I walk up and down the aisles of stores with people, and I encourage them to turn the box over and to definitely shop on the periphery. You mostly want to keep packaged foods as a treat, and you want to make wise choices. And if you don't understand a word on the label, don't buy it. If you don't recognize it or you can't pronounce it, it's probably not good for you.
Probably not good for you.
know.
I want to thank you all. Thank you very much.
Because it's the holiday season.
Yeah, please.
Is that if we go to these buffets where we're going to eat a bunch of food, there's some simple rules you can do that will dramatically lower your...
Oh, I want to hear this. Yeah, please.
Is it the first time you go to the buffet line, you limit yourself to 3 food items only. You get to pick those 3. When you eat them one at a time, but starting with the protein or the vegetable. Always start with the protein. And then you can tell yourself, okay, the second time I can go through the buffet line, I can have whatever I want. but you'll find that you eat far fewer calories than if you load your plate up with 6 different things and eat and rotate it around and eat it. So limit it to 3 things, eat one at a time, and then you can say, okay, after that, I can go back and have whatever I want.
Give your stomach time to not feel hungry in the meantime. Yep. All right.
Yep.
Good advice. Absolutely. I want to thank you all. I want to thank you for joining us here at CrowdHealing. I want to thank Bill and Seth and Lauren and Scott. Thank you very much for joining us today. Look for more informational shows coming from CrowdHealing, and you have a good evening.